Dude, it freaking fits. Whoever said minivans aren't cool. Hello, welcome to my favorite parking lot. I have two bikes here. I have my 26-inch DJ bike and my BMX bike. Today I'm going to go over the dynamics of the Bunnyhop. I'm going to do it a little differently than most Bunnyhop videos because there's tons of how to Bunnyhop videos out there. But I'm going to try to describe the difference between a smaller bike with a shorter wheelbase and a shorter rear end. And shorter rear end meaning the distance from axle bottom bracket to rear wheel axle on each bike really affects how a Bunnyhop feels and how hard you have to pull up on the front end. So before I get into the differences between the bikes, I want to get into the mechanics of the Bunnyhop, or the how-to of the Bunnyhop, and explain the two different types. There's the two wheels at the same time, which I consider the wrong way to do a Bunnyhop, although there are applications you might want to do that, and I'll explain those. And then there's the correct way to do the Bunnyhop, which is pulling up your front wheel first, then your rear wheel second, and I'll explain why that is a better way to do a Bunnyhop than the first way. I also am not clipped in. I have the Ride Concept Vice shoes, which I still have to do a review on, but I'm going to ride them a little bit and then I'll talk about them in a future video. But I'm not clipped in, and that's a very important part of learning how to do the Bunnyhop. You definitely don't want to learn clipped in, because then you're not going to learn the proper way to do it. So anyway, let's get into the how-to aspect of this video, and then we'll get into the differences and kind of the mechanics of it. I have a couple prerequisite videos before I get into the how-to. There's the how to pull up the front wheel video that I did. There's also the how to pull up the rear wheel video that I did, and I'll link them in this video so you can go to those, but I recommend you watching those first. And even though I did them on my full suspension mountain bike, the same rules apply to any bicycle you ride. All right, let's get into the how-to of this video. So I'm going to quickly go over some of the prerequisites that are in my videos. There's the pulling up the front wheel, which you want to have your cranks level. Favorite foot forward, I like to say. Some people are left foot forward, some people are right foot forward, whichever you're comfortable with. And then you want to pull up the front wheel. So pulling up the front wheel isn't arms bent going like this. And if you watched my front wheel how-to, I kind of did a little funny skit with that. But you want to actually get your weight back, hips back over the rear axle, rear tire, whatever you want to call it, and that thrust back will pull up your front wheel. That's the first half of the Bunnyhop. The second half is the pushing forward with your arms, and by pushing forward with your arms, once your front wheel's up there, and then compressing your legs up into your body, you'll actually get the back wheel up. If you watch my video on how to pop up the back wheel, you push forward and jump up, and I'll demonstrate both of those things really quickly, and then we'll go on to the Bunnyhop. It's a little windy today, so excuse any wind sound. So pulling up the front wheel, weight back, pulling up the front wheel. This is the first half of the Bunnyhop. Here's the second half of the Bunnyhop. Is you crouch, compress, pop up as you push forward on the handlebars. It's all timing. Push, pop. So I'm actually doing a motion with my arms like this. It's kind of like a C motion, and it's all timing, and you got to pop it. You can't just gradually, I'm gonna do this. You got to actually be really forceful and aggressive with it, and the timing has to be perfect with when you hop up with your legs. You also, I don't describe it a ton. A lot of people talking about Bunnyhops will talk about this toe point, toe curl thing. I do that a little bit, and I'll go ahead and do this again, and you can see that real quick. And I'd probably just do this naturally because I've been doing it for so long, but I'm kind of pushing back, pushing kind of into the pedals and back with my feet as I pull up the legs. It's something you'll just have to get a feel for, and really hard to describe, but once you've started to get the back wheel off the ground, you can figure that out. Now let's combine those two things and get the front wheel up, and then right as the front wheel hits the peak, you're going to pull up the back wheel. Rather than waiting for the front wheel to come down, you're going to do that lean back, pull up. As you do that, you're going to crouch, and that's kind of, I've talked about that before, where you want to actually be kind of down and low with your legs, because now you're all set and preloading, so you can do the push forward and spring and get the back end up. We'll do a couple regular speed, and then I'll do a slow motion one so you can see the mechanics. So notice how my arms are going to be straight in the initial pull. So I'll show you the kind of how I'll show you kind of how some people think you do the bunny hop. You're not leaned forward and like this over the handlebars. You want to be way back here. Also notice as I'm demoing this, I land on the front wheel. That's what you're going to do when you're learning it. So that's why I'm doing that. And then when you get better at it, you learn how to control the pitch of the bike in the air. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's do a slow motion. Okay, so once you get the basics down, your next goal is going to be to get higher in the air. So in order to get higher on the bunny hop, that's all going to be determined by how high you get the front wheel. So this motion where you're throwing your weight back and getting the front end up is extremely important, because to get higher, you have to get the front end higher. You can't get the front end this high and then bunny hop this high. You have to get the front end up there, and then once you spring off with your legs, your front end's going to go a little bit higher, but it's not going to go that much higher than how high you pull it. And so that initial, what you're doing with your arms, is really important, and I don't think people stress that enough. Yes, your legs matter, and yes, your spring up matters. It's like jumping to shoot a basketball, all that stuff, but the upper body that you need to put into this, and the amount of like weight you throw back and getting the front wheel up there, is really important. And where the upper body really comes into play isn't so much in pulling up, it's the thrusting forward, and it's the control of the bike in the air. So it's very physical motion, and an extremely aggressive motion. It's not like something you just kind of daintily do lightly. You see people that do bunny hops all the time, they make it look really easy. But when you're learning, it's like a grunt, really aggressive, quick, snapping move. So I'm going to go and show a little bit of how to do it higher. So to hop higher, you got to get the front end higher. I can even go higher than that. Let's try it. I'll really crouch, pull up the front end, and get up there. So because I'm going to do a whole bunch of these and I'm going to do some on my BMX bike. I don't want to wear myself out by trying to get super high, but I'm also, I wouldn't say rusty, but you know, I'm probably not at my best bunny hopping game. I once bunny hopped up a wall that was like this high. I wish I could find the photo of me, because I'm almost vertical on the bike like this to get up there. So the idea of getting really high has a lot to do with how high you get the front end up. Let's go ahead and talk about the other way to do a bunny hop and why this way is more important. So I'm going to use these blocks of wood to demonstrate the two types of bunny hops. The one type is both wheels at the same time, and then there's the type I've been showing you where you pull up the front wheel, then you pull up the rear wheel. So I'm going to go over these 2x4s, and the first one I'm going to do is both wheels at the same time, and then the second one I'm going to do is going to be front wheel to rear wheel. So I don't know if you noticed in the video, I'm kind of hoping you did, but I went about half the speed doing it front wheel to rear wheel than I did doing both wheels at the same time. So the idea is if you do both wheels at the same time, you have to bunny hop way back here, both wheels, and then you have to get, here's the wheelbase of the bike, so you have to at least go this far, and then to get over the 2x4s, you have to go an additional foot or so to get over. If you do front wheel to rear wheel, I come up, pull up my front wheel, then I pull up my back wheel, and then I push my back wheel down and come down. Like, it is so much less effort. You can do it with less speed, and you don't have to bunny hop nearly the distance that you do if you do both wheels at the same time. So I did say that I will talk about when would you do both wheels at the same time. Well, I would call that more of a trials move, and this is why you would want to do it. So if you're trying to hop in place, I'm doing both wheels at the same time. I can pivot the bike, hop around, but this has no intended purpose besides having fun. Like if I want to do something fancy, put my wheel on these. I don't know if I can do it without a front brake, but I can go up here, pop around, pop off, whatever. Right? Like, so there is an application, as I'm getting out of breath from doing that, for doing both wheels at the same time. But the main bunny hop, like what you do on a trail or anywhere else, front wheel to back wheel. Best way to do it. When I talk about the pre-hop on drops, front wheel, so you come to the ledge, front wheel, back wheel, dive into your drop. So if you do both wheels at the same time, you risk the back wheel hitting the ledge and making you endo, stuff like that. So now that I've gone over that and I'm out of breath still, let me grab my BMX bike and I'll show you kind of the difference between different bikes and how bunny hops feel on them. All right, let's see if this works. I'm going to try to position these two bikes side by side. Let's put the longer bike in the back and the shorter bike in the front and kind of talk about this. You can see I got the axles lined up, and so the distance from what's called the chainstay length, which is the measurement between the rear axle, center of rear axle, to center of what's called the spindle of the crank, is what's called the chainstay length. That distance on the Haro, on the DJ bike, is probably a good, I'd say, 1.5 to 2 inches longer. And I don't know off the top of my head what the actual measurements are when you look at the geometry, but I definitely know the BMX bike is a lot shorter. Now look at the bike in general. The BMX bike is quite a bit shorter. If we go axle to axle, they're actually pretty close, and so what makes one bike seem shorter than the other is the size of the wheels more than anything. But the BMX bike, even the wheelbase axle to axle, is still a few inches shorter. So that's the main difference on why the BMX bike is going to handle differently. If you look at cockpit, like handlebar height and seat height, they're pretty much roughly the same. So, you know, the reason a BMX bike has a tall handlebar is because the frame is so low down here that you still want to have your handlebar in approximately the same place as you want it on your mountain bike or dirt jump bike or whatever. You kind of want a similar feel there. You don't want a low handlebar on here, and you certainly don't want like super high handlebar on here. It would just be really awkward. So that's why BMX bikes have handlebars that are tall like this, is simply because they're just much lower to the ground because of the 20-inch wheel. So if you were ever wondering, that's why. So let's go ahead and do some bunny hops on the BMX bike, and I'll explain kind of the difference in feel. So the BMX bike, first of all, it's lighter in weight, so it's, you know, pretty light. And second, the front end on this bike is going to come up way easier. It's going to be like, I don't have to throw back nearly as hard to get the front end up there. I do have to admit that I feel a little bit more sketchy on this bike because I don't ride it as much as I ride my bigger bikes. I try, but I like to ride my mountain bikes and bigger bikes. I get used to the feel, and then I get on this bike, and this bike feels super squirrely and sketchy, so it takes me a little while to get used to it. So I'm not sure how high I'll be able to bunny hop, but technically I should be able to bunny hop higher on this bike than I can on the 26-inch DJ, and I know I can jump this bike higher, so I know it's possible, but it's whether I'm used to it or comfortable with doing it, because when I pull up on this bike and get the front wheel up there, it feels like I'm gonna fall off backwards. So a very different feel. So let's go ahead and do some bunny hops on this bike. So I'm gonna start off with some smaller ones. All right. The front end comes up a lot easier on the BMX bike, and I don't know, I can't tell, but I'm probably going already as high as I went on the 26-inch bike. But it feels really easy. It just pops right up. So I feel like BMX bikes, kind of the reason they're still around and people haven't adapted to bigger bikes, is because they're just a lot easier to handle and throw around. Once you get used to them, they're easier to do 180s with, 360s with, bunny hops, all that stuff. And you see BMX riders doing just crazy flipping whatever tricks, and the reason why they ride a bike like this is because they're way more capable of doing that kind of stuff than bigger bikes. I do have to say there's some pretty amazing stuff on bigger bikes too. I watch Sam Pilgrim all the time, and I'm always shocked at what he does, even on like an e-bike. I'm just like, what? So it's possible to do pretty much anything on any size bike. So, but a 20-inch BMX bike, you can whip these things around all day long. Let's go ahead and see if I can get a little higher. So I'm gonna come right out and say it. I don't ride this bike enough because I don't feel comfortable really giving it the yank that I do on the 26-inch wheel bike, just because I don't ride it enough. And once I pulled up and looped out and fell off the back and landed on my feet, of course. I'll show that in the clip. So I'm not gonna push it on this bike right now. I don't ride it enough to feel like comfortable popping really high. But we'll go ahead and cap this video with a little review of what you should be doing. So to recap, you want to work on getting the front end up, getting it as high as you can get it, then working on doing the back end. Pull up. I do my compression as I'm going into it, pull up, and then I spring and push forward. It's kind of a pull up, squat, pull, spring, push. I don't really know any better way to describe it. It's one of those things you get the feel for the more that you do it. So hopefully this video is a little helpful. Hopefully it helps you understand a little bit of what makes a bike feel the way it feels. As you get into even bigger bikes like 29ers, you even get a longer spindle to axle chainstay length, and that makes it even harder. Suspension bikes is a whole nother thing where you got to preload the shock, things like that. Maybe I'll do a how-to on bunny hopping a full suspension bike. But it's basically the mechanics. So regardless of the bike you're riding, work on that front wheel and really getting it high, because that's what's going to build you into the rest of the bunny hop. And then the push forward, the spring, toe curl, lift, all that stuff comes into play, and you just practice and get it dialed. Start out with tiny bunny hops and build your way up to bigger bunny hops. Even if you're just getting a few inches off the ground, you shouldn't learn by trying to go big right away. Start out by just getting your front wheel a couple inches off the ground, then your back wheel, and doing a little endo thing, and then go a little bigger and bigger. And then once you get into the air, you'll learn how to suck your legs up and get the back end up and point the front end down, or keep pulling on the front end and push the legs down to get the rear wheel down, or you can kind of release them both at the same time. I mean, you can really, once you're in the air, you can just control the bike using your arms and your legs and the pitch of the bike and all of that. But that comes later once you've learned to initially get off the ground. So I hope you found this video helpful. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.